Hello, my friends. I'm so excited today to have Deb McDaniel here, who is an attachment-based leadership and business coach and CEO of Becoming Luminary. Hello, Deb. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. So, I'm really excited because when I was reading your info, you have gone on quite the business journey. So, let's start
Yeah.
off with, what are you doing right now? What does your business look like today?
Yeah. Right now, I'm actually in the middle of a pivot. I would say I'm kind of landing the plane with the direction that I'm going in right now. So, right now, I support 7 and 8 figure business owners, women business owners, with navigating their attachment styles in relation to how they lead their business. So once you get to like the 7 figures, 8 figures, and I've worked behind the scenes with a number of 7 and 8 figures as a fractional director of operations, I always see there's like this like invisible ceiling that comes up, and it's not a strategy based thing when they're so used to the strategies breaking through these glass ceilings. And so, really, it's about our internal view of the world, how the patterns that can propel you forward to 6 figures and 7 figures and even 8 figures at a certain point become like a hindrance to your growth. They got you there, but then suddenly you're realizing like, this isn't the healthiest. It isn't the most sustainable. I'm having trouble navigating relationships in my business with my clients, with my team. Some of my clients have like co-CEOs. So I'm having issues with communicating and feeling understood and feeling heard with, the people that are in the scope of my business. And so I help them basically to get much clearer on, what are the patterns? What are the underlying patterns that you might have? What are the rooted beliefs that you developed as a child to your caregiver that you use to propel your business to this level and are now kind of causing some issues because you're running into these like blind spots, attachment blind spots. So I do coaching with that. And then on the personal side of like the fun side of my business, I am getting really deep into like energetic work and shadows and all the fun, juicy stuff that I love to do.
Hmm, I love this. And can you give a little crash course on attachment style for those who are
Oh,
not as
yes.
familiar?
Yeah. Okay. So, crash course on attachment. So, there's this theory that became, pretty popularized in the 70s that states that as a child, you will attach to your caregiver in a number of ways. And so they did a bunch of studies starting in like the 1940s when World War II was happening, where they tracked kids who, you know, predominantly parents were in the household, and then suddenly your caregivers were having to go to war and mothers were having to go to work. And so they started doing these like just following children. And in the 70s, they determined that when you're a child, in order to like thrive, then you have to have these 3 criteria that are met. So the first criteria is that you had an environment, like your physical environment was pretty safe. There wasn't a lot of like harm where you could hurt yourself. So that's the first thing, is like you felt safe in your environment. You had safety. The second was that you had a caregiver, like your primary caregiver. So it could be mother, father, guardian, whoever was predominantly around you. They were available to help regulate you. So as a child, our right brains, and I'm in a master's of neuroscience and business psychology right now, and I find it very fascinating. But essentially, our right brain is like the thing that lights up when we're born, and it's all experiential. You're perceiving things, you're seeing things. And then as you start to grow, your left hemisphere, your left brain turns on and starts to like interpret those things. And so right brain is all irrational emotion, primitive, survival based. And so as a child, when you're navigating like what am I feeling in my body I'm feeling uncomfortable, and you can't language it because your right brain is not language based. It's emotions, it's visuals. Then you have an adult who can teach you how to perceive yourself and communicate and regulate your emotions so that you know, and you've bonded with them enough that when you're feeling something, they are self-aware enough to meet you where you're at and guide you through regulation. So that's the second criteria.
So I
And then
want
the
to,
third,
so before we get to
yeah,
the third,
yeah,
so similarly, I have a background in both in biology and clinical psychology, like a higher
mhm,
degree. And I've never studied children so much. This was not my thing. So when you're describing this and the right brain and the left brain and how this applies to children, I'm like, oh, like a whole light bulb went off for me. Cause I'm like,
yeah.
right? Like it's so cool. Like this explanation of,
So
right? Like
interesting.
your right brain develops first and oh, that makes perfect sense. And so anyhow, so I just was like, oh, like to me as like a little science nerd and psychology nerd, I love this.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating.
I'm so glad you're a science nerd because I am too. I'm like energy and for learning all of these things. So then the third criteria that has to be met is that not only is your caregiver self-aware enough to be able to regulate you, to see you in need of regulation and available to do that, but they are primarily regulated themselves. So you're witnessing them be in regulation. And that's how our left brain starts to interpret the world. So your left brain starts to develop right around like that 6, 7 years old, and it's taking in all of the experiences that you have. So
And
if,
I'm chuckling
yeah,
because I'm like, what percentage of people are able to, right, are and I
mhm.
don't want to give away the plot in terms of attachment style, but are like, I'm like, yeah, the percentages I imagine have to be pretty low, the ones who are both able to regulate their children and are self-regulated enough themselves.
Right. Well, so this is, I kind of question the math. The math doesn't
Mm.
math to me
Okay,
in my
okay.
experience. But I will say that if all three of those things are met,
Hmm.
then you as a child will go through the world and become an adult who is pretty fearless. You don't have, like, you will take risks and you know how to both check in with your emotions and like use the logic of your brain. Like you have a very nice duality of using your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere to make decisions. So there's a level of confidence there. There's a level of taking risk. There is like generally like an open heart to the world, right?
Hmm.
You have a trust because you were raised in an environment where trust was inherently present for you. So when you run into issues, it's not like a big deal. Like you figure out, it doesn't take much, like a tweak here, a tweak there to get that going and do the things. And studies show that around, this is where I'm like, the math. Studies show that about 67% of people in this world have a secure attachment. And that's what that means is.
I'm sorry, teacher. No.
Yeah.
That's what the study 67%.
67%.
Secure
Yeah.
attachment style. I know
Yeah.
I'm on the same page as you. Like, what? Like, no way.
Like, I don't know, man. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
That's from the studies that
Wow.
they've done and they've looked at. That's across the board. They say about 67 to 70% have secure attachment,
Okay.
which
All
is
right.
wild to me.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. We
Yeah.
want to be open to the world. We want to have the ability to distinguish, when do we tap into our emotional state? When do we tap into data and logic and reasoning and analyzing? And it allows you to move through the world. So they looked at this through like primarily intimate relationships. And when I was learning this, I thought, why is nobody talking about this in business? Because these are the same, how you attach to your caregiver and how you attach to your spouse or your partner is the same way you're attaching to clients. It's the same way you're attaching to, your team. There's so many facets. We could look at money. We could look at all sorts of stuff. So back to that point, if you didn't have those three things, at least one of them, if not any of them, then you generally fall into three what's called insecure attachment styles. And so one is anxious preoccupied. And what that means is that um, basically like you didn't have access to those three things, that safe environment, a caregiver who was available to regulate you. and they were regulated themselves. So with an anxious preoccupied, they generally found that that usually happens when the caregiver is not readily available to regulate you. So that second criteria. And what you learn as a child then is that my caregiver is not always around. And so I need to do whatever I can to keep them as long as possible. And so it's like if you look at nervous system responses, right? So you have a secure attached person generally has a very regulated, resilient, flexible nervous system response. An anxious preoccupied person has they're always on like a fight response. And the fight response is like there is a threat of my caregiver being taken away because either they weren't physically there or they just weren't emotionally there to soothe you. And so as a child, what that looks like is ramping up, temper tantrums, screaming, really heightening like your body response. And what they found in these studies is that if you were a child with an anxious preoccupied attachment, you ramp up, you have this big explosion, and sometimes your parent would come back and they would actually ramp up even more because if the thought process at that very immature left brain that's still trying to analyze, what do I do, is like, well, if I calm down, they'll leave again. They won't be available to focus on me. So I got to stay like hype. And what this looks like as adults in business is having to like micromanage the relationships that you're with, people pleasing, really like going above and beyond, overworking, overcommitting, over communicating to make sure that the relationships that you form are not at risk of being, left behind or you being abandoned. So that's one. If you learn that your caregiver was not available for you and that it's kind of like similar, then you could have gone the opposite direction where anxious ramps up and they fight. You have dismissive avoidant, which is the second insecure style. And that is about like, okay, that means that I can't like nobody's going to be available for me. So it's not worth it for me to try and have somebody help me. So I just need to shove my emotions, my emotional needs under a rug and get away from like feeling. And so that's what a dismissive avoidant does is really like feelings. I don't want them. Like I want to look at the strategies. I want to look at how can I keep myself busy so that if I'm feeling negative feelings, like it's like a trigger in your brain that's like, nope, there's nobody that's going to be able to meet me here. So I don't need it. I can push through. I know your community is like spiritual and soulful. So it really looks like you'll be doing journaling and you'll feel like I'm frustrated. I'm feeling like this feeling of frustration in my business because maybe something has changed and I don't know how to fix it. And a dismissive avoidant person will generally like, they'll feel that and they'll maybe write in their journal, like, I'm a little upset, but I need to stay like, I'm so grateful for the universe and for God and all the things. And like, they will completely bypass that negative feeling and really try and focus on the positive, even though there's dissonance, right? You're still feeling it. And so they're very much like a flight, like get away from the things. And it's not like they don't do anything because they do a lot. They do a lot of busy work. They do a lot of keeping themselves in motion, just like an anxious, but in a different way, basically. So then the final one is called fearful avoidant or disorganized attached. And this is what I have. This is my style that I've had to work through a ton of years. And still like, I'll still find myself kind of doing this. And a fearful avoidant style usually develops when you had access to none of those criteria. So if you had at least one, then you'll generally fall into anxious, preoccupied, or dismissive avoidant. But if you had access to not a safe environment, no regulated caregiver, no caregiver that was available to even attempt to regulate you, then what you will generally find is that you have like mixed signals. Your brain, your left brain couldn't determine what is the one way to get my needs met. Like if I'm anxious, I know if I throw a big enough tantrum, my parents going to come and see me. A dismissive avoidant. If I stuff down my feelings and I pretend like I'm fine 100% of the time, I'm the golden child, I'm, all the things, then great. My parents come back and connect with me because I don't need anything emotionally from them. Well, when you have fearful avoidant or disorganized, none of those things work. So not for a consistent amount of time. So you might try a temper tantrum. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. You might try avoiding your feelings. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And so what happens is you're in this push-pull of, I can't trust people completely to meet my needs. I also can't trust myself to meet my needs. And so what ultimately happens is you have this push-pull that ends in freeze, which is, as a business owner, it's apathy, it's dissociating, it's getting overwhelmed in your thoughts. You'll have an idea, and then suddenly, like, you want to do things, but then you're questioning yourself. There's a high level of like suspicion within your own ideas and with how other people will meet you. And so those are the dynamics that I have seen play out in different perspectives. I've seen it from my own. Once I started digging into this, of, how now that I know that I have this fearful avoidant tendency, how does that play out with how I make decisions in my business? How does that play out with offers that I choose, or, the audience that I'm connecting with? How does that play out with clients? And so really looking at those interactions and how basically it's like your left brain didn't develop the knowing and the understanding to perceive what is a threat and what is safe. And so your body is basically attuned to constantly be on alert for danger. Whereas if you're secure attached, you're attuned to safety. You're looking for safety. You're looking for success. Your body is leaning towards it. Versus insecure attachment, your body is always watching for the other shoe to drop in some way, shape, or form. So you're doing all these mitigating strategies to prevent this perceived loss that you might not even know that you're doing.
You know what's so interesting as you're speaking about this? So me, I'm on the avoidance side, and I was like, okay, in my first sort of like deep work on this was actually related to my business before it was related to my romantic relationships.
Yeah.
So, right. So, which is so interesting. So I've worked a lot on somatic things, on, really feeling, on all of these things. So I've been doing this work for a number of years on and off. And I just think it's so interesting that I didn't necessarily attach it to my attachment style, but this is what I'm doing, right? I'm like, okay, no, I need to feel like working on this. So I really appreciate how your attachment style really does play into your business. And I find it so interesting. And I also, I think the second person. A few episodes ago, I spoke with another guest who works with both business owners and romantic relationships. So there's so much connection there. And I think this is so interesting.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If you were to give, because I want to kind of like, I have like two sides that I want to talk about. So both like your journey and then this, because this is my jam. I love talking about these things. So if you were going to give maybe a couple of, let's say like tips or things that maybe practices or things like this for each type of style, just like very quick things or things that if you want to start, addressing this within your business, would you be able to do that for us?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say all of the attachment styles relate to, so there's three things that I kind of look at when you pull out the 30,000 foot view of what I kind of do in so many ways, shapes, or forms. And that is like capacity. So nervous system capacity is one thing.
Yeah.
And then alignment is another thing. And then like I would say strategy is the third thing. And so your attachment styles really dictate your nervous system capacity for success and for perceived failure, right? So it's so if you have an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, then your capacity for discomfort is very small. And across all three insecure attachment styles, we all, if you have these insecure attachment styles, you have a very small window of like discomfort capacity. So in order to start to change things into more like a secure, because you can model it. These are resilient, they are flexible, and you can teach your brain. You basically just have to bring your left brain up to speed with the reality of the world versus what your left brain was cultivated in.
Isn't that amazing? Don't we love that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That you're like,
Yes.
okay, like, great. The first step is identifying, and now you're like, we can grow. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that's you bring up a really good point, because I personally, as I've been digging into this, I've thought about, self-sabotage as a pattern and self-defeat as a pattern. And what I've come to realize is that I don't know that any of those actually exist. Self-sabotage it's just your left brain misinterpreting the context of whatever this event is. So something really great happens, and your left brain can only contextualize this based off of what happened when you were a kid and something good happened.
That feels so relieving. It's like so, I don't know, it just feels so much more comforting that thinking like, oh, I self-sabotage. That feels heavy, right?
Because it feels like I'm intentionally I'm intentionally psyching myself out from doing something amazing. And so if you realize like your left brain just never got the chance to see an environment that was safe and regulating and nurturing. And so it's just misperceiving. You're taking in information and your left brain is misperceiving that information as a threat. And so if we can teach our left brain to see that as just information, not a threat, and then we can tap into navigating using our rational side, our left brain, with our emotional side, our right brain, then we can make some better decisions. So with anxious, the discomfort that we want to work on is the discomfort of not pleasing everybody at the detriment to ourselves. Because so often, even as a child, you think about when you have to ramp your body up to throw a tantrum of that magnitude and then sustain it, like your body is in a lot of hurt, pain, chaos. There's neurological things, there's physiological things. And so what we want to work on is, like everybody says, boundaries, but really it's true for somebody that has an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. And you have to build the muscle of saying no and holding yourself.
And it's interesting. I would love us to see a study on online service providers, because I know this is a big issue. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what percentage of done-for-you service providers are anxious attachment style. Because there's so much people pleasing, so much putting your clients above everything else. And it's a big part of what I do with my people as well, because it's something that a lot of my clients struggle with.
Exactly. And so that's like, I've worked predominantly with service providers, and that was the same thing that I saw. Like, most of my clients had these anxious, preoccupied attachment styles. And it's like, okay, I recognize that it's really hard to say no, to put down a boundary, because when you're anxious, preoccupied, you generally believe that the world should be boundaryless. Like, you overgive to your detriment and people overgive to their detriment to you. That's the expectation. And when that doesn't happen, then you start mitigating. How do I pull somebody to become essentially boundaryless with me?
Yeah.
Because that's how you think. Like this, again, if you think like this is my child brain trying to rationalize how this world works.
Exactly.
So with anxious, you really want to start with name a boundary and then practice regulating yourself down. So calming your nervous system, holding the no, making sure that like this is where like meditations and breathing exercises and all of those things are really great, because you're teaching your nervous system and you're teaching your left brain how to handle discomfort. If you are dismissive avoidant, it's kind of the same thing.
Hold on. So to pause on that, the other piece of this is really cool, is that once you do the experiment, let me put a little boundary, see, and then you get to see and you get to teach your nervous system and your brain, right, that, oh, nothing bad happened.
Nothing bad happened.
Yeah. And then that builds the resilience, then you grow from there. So it's really just the practice and the consistency and sticking with it. And then you'll look back, a little bit from when you started, you'll be like, oh, I've grown so much and I'm able to say and be confident about it. And it's really a beautiful thing to witness in yourself.
Yeah. So I would say to even like land that even a little bit more, you could look at, service providers. Let's say that somebody has like a discovery call with you and they say, like, I need some time to think about it. An anxious, preoccupied person with those patterns unrecognized would be like, oh crap, I need to I'm going to say, okay, but I'm going to be watching my email. I'm going to be looking, I'm going to start kind of cyber stalking them on Facebook and Instagram. And like, what are they thinking? What can I do? You might send an email that gives them some discounts or like these are all anxious, preoccupied strategies that your left brain is like, okay, we are in danger. Like, this is serious. We got to step it up. We got to show them that we are so boundaryless that they will say, okay, great. And in those kinds of moments, it's got to be like okay, like, I'm going to trust myself to hold me. I'm going to trust you to make a decision. And then in that in-between moment before you have like a yes or a no or a follow-up, you need to regulate yourself. Get away from your computer and do some regulation to soothe your nervous system, because you never learned as a child how to soothe yourself. So you've got to start, touch. I love somatic. So, rubbing your shoulders, touching your arms, really focusing on like, I need to down regulate here.
And yeah, for sure. And again, like recognizing that, oh, this is what's happening, and knowing that this is what's happening and why is the first thing. And then be like, okay, now what can I do? Because I feel like a lot of times, and I saw this again, like my former life was a psychologist doing therapy, that once you start to realize that this is what's happening, then the changes come so much faster. Then you can really get into it, because people are so, just generally when these things happen, it's so unconscious. It's been however many years, right? It's so unconscious. And once you once you bring it to light, then it's like, oh, this is what's happening. And it's so relieving to know.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, I feel freaked out right now, but now I know why I'm feeling freaked out. And I know that I'm not in actual danger, and I can teach myself that this is not the time to be this ramped up. Like, how do I bring myself down to like a neutral? Neutrality is the thing for like good and bad. Like, we want to just get ourselves to neutral, because at that neutral place, we have access to both hemispheres of our brain. We make a lot more rational decisions. So for dismissive avoidant, it's the same thing. So like, it's so funny because I used to think I was dismissive avoidant until I really started digging into fearful avoidant. And I will say that one of the things that I was terrible at when I was doing, my first business was actually ghostwriting. And then I pivoted and I started.
We're going to get into that in a second. Yeah. Lots of pivots.
I will say, what would happen is people would send me messages and say that they wanted to work with me, which is like, you want that. But when you are running like this dismissive avoidant pattern, like seeing somebody desire to work with you can bring up those like, well, what if I'm not good enough? Because that's generally what you learned as a child, was like, my emotions were not good, and my parents they won't respond to me if I have them, which means I myself am not good unless I am perfect, unless I am emotionally, contained, rational. And so what will happen is, if these patterns are playing out in your business, you get somebody that's like, hey, I want to book a call with you. What does that look like? You will go into like the like deer in headlights. Like, what? Me? What do you? And God forbid if this person, like, you don't respond because you're processing, like, what does this mean? You're very much like I need to analyze, why does this person want this? You're perceiving them as potentially needy, which you have learned is not good. So you're doing all of the internal stuff, and God forbid they send you another message to say, hey, I had this happen to me. This one lady messaged me. I didn't get the email, and it was like a breakdown in my tech. And so she emailed me. I didn't get it. She messaged me on Facebook to let me know that it had been a few days and I never responded. So I'm going to look for like, where the heck did she? And in the meantime, she found a calendar that was hidden and booked a call. And my patterns were like, I don't even know how to respond to this. So I'm doing flight. I'm troubleshooting my tech. I'm not responding to her. It took me 3 days to be like, okay, we have a call set. Let's do this. And that's generally what happens when you have a dismissive avoidant pattern, is like freak out. Like somebody expressed interest in value in something that I do. I don't know how to hold that and be perfect when I show up for them. So I need some distance. I need to find some things to do to, make sure that when I show up, I'm perfect. If somebody didn't book a call, let's say like you've launched something and you're trying to sell it and you make a social media post, and suddenly the same, like, I got to get away from this. I can't, I'm watching it and nobody liked it. So now I'm questioning, was this the right thing to sell? And you're back in the weeds. You're whatever I need to tinker with. And the same thing has to happen. So you get something good. And when you start to like feel the feelings of like, I'm getting overwhelmed, I'm trying to check out, then you want to practice staying in place and like regulating yourself down, because this is still a heightened nervous system response. You've got to calm yourself down enough to like get access to both these hemispheres of your brain so that you can think rationally and really look at the situation to see, is this a person that I want to work with? Is this not? Is this the right offer? But you can't do it if you're trying to run away and get away and like not do the things. Fearful avoidant, which is what I ultimately realized I had, what it's you actually have to ramp up your nervous system, because what generally happens is you get stuck in your head of overthinking the things, because anxious, preoccupied, I trust other people's opinions of me more than I trust myself. That's generally what the foundational like core belief is. So if somebody else sees value in me, then I will see value in me. But if I can't determine that somebody sees value in me, then it must mean that I'm not valuable. So I have to do more. Dismissive avoidant is the opposite. I trust me. I don't trust the people around me, because I'm going to have to be perfect to meet their needs. And that can result in like the loss of freedom, the loss of flexibility that I like. There's a lot of like, I trust me. I don't trust myself in a tied relationship with you. What does that mean about me? What am I going to have to do to contort myself to meet your needs? And so with fearful avoidant, it's, I don't trust myself to make the right decision. And I also don't trust that if I make the right decision, that I'll be received by somebody that, makes me feel like I made the right decision. So there's a lack of trust on both ends, which ultimately is like freeze. And so these are like the service providers who I've worked with a ton, who like want to start a business, want to do the things. I worked with a few years ago, this phenomenal editor, and she had been editing for years, but not being paid for it. And suddenly, she wants to start selling this and being paid. And it's like, I can't. Like, you have the skill set, you have the skill set, and you have experience. And it was like for a month and a half, could not even just make a post to say, hey, I'm doing this service. And it's freeze. It's like you get to it and it's like a wall, and you shut down and you dissociate, and you're in your head. You're not in your body at all. Your regulation is, your nervous system is so down regulated that it's like meditations and vision, like that's going to sink you deeper into this apathetic state where you can't make a decision. And so what you have to practice is when you start to notice dissociation, which can look like, it often does look like overthinking, overanalyzing, being up in your head, daydreaming, fantasizing, like the escape mechanisms, the mental escape mechanisms are oftentimes like this freeze state because we are so dissociated from reality. We escape into our heads, we escape into whatever we can, TV, books, all of that. You have to start bringing in some movement. So when you've escaped, start to wiggle your hands, start to wiggle your toes, stand up, stretch, bring back the awareness to your body. And you have to consistently do this every time you start to escape. Like, okay, I need to wiggle, I need to stretch, I need to just start to bring feeling back into your limbs, because that's the only way to get yourself out of this like chronic freeze state that can happen. And that's what ultimately started happening with me.
It's all so fascinating and makes so much sense. And I love that you are bringing this or have brought this into the business world, because it affects it. I mean, you can see so many examples that you've given. You can see how this affects everything in business. And the cool part is that once you start working on this, it also helps your life in general. So,
absolutely.
Right? So
like, once
amazing.
You become secure attached in one area.
Yeah.
It's so easy to become secure attached in other areas too. So like I started working on this stuff for my business, but ultimately it has supported my kids, because I'm witnessing now, like my daughter, she's 15 years old, and I started getting into this work when she was about 9. And at that point, she had severe anxiety. And I didn't recognize it because I was parenting from the ways that I was parenting or parented. And it took her, like, I'm witnessing how just chronically anxious she is about not meeting like the perfect standards that I had set. And so I started doing this work on myself and like really untangling all of my stuff. And now at 15, just today, she's on a vacation with my 2 older aunts, and everybody comments how confident my daughter is. Like, she is herself no matter where she is. She's doing all sorts of stuff. She just got accepted into student council at her high school, things that like she never would have attempted. She was in theater last year. And so I can witness how me becoming more secure attached translates to how I parent, and it translates to my children.
Yeah. And you're breaking the generational traumas. Like, oh, yeah.
Exactly. And it just also speaks to like the resiliency of the brain, because I was good. Mm-hmm. I provided a safe environment for my children, but there were things that I was like severely lacking because I had never been given those things. And so much is said about, like the things that happen between when you're 0 and 7 years old. It's like, it's the most critical moments and the trauma and all that.
Right.
And it just speaks to like, I didn't start working on this until my daughter was 10.
Right.
And at 15, like such a completely like 180-degree turn can happen in such a short amount of time. And also, one thing to be said is like, it only takes 30%. Like if your childhood had 30% of those 3 criteria I mentioned earlier, you will have a secure attachment. So the bar is pretty stinking low. Like you gotta be there 30% of the time.
Yeah.
And even as an adult, 30% of the time, if you can model secure attachment for yourself, 30% of the time, your brain will pick up on it and you will become a secure attached individual.
And this is another point of, oh, this is doable. There's hope. This is not just, oh, I'm self-sabotaging doing this and I can't overcome that. 30%. Recognize 30%. What you're doing, like so doable, which is amazing,
so
amazing. So, okay, I could talk about this for another 6 hours, but we were going to, I also want to transition and pivot because I think so thank you for sharing all of that. I think that was an amazing overview, and we got into a lot of really also good things that people can do, right now. And then at the end, we'll find out how we can connect with you further. So if people want to dive in more, of course. So the other part of why you are so interesting is because you yourself have, as you mentioned, you started off as a ghostwriter, and now you are doing this. You're doing this coaching based on attachment style. So in order to not make this a 6-hour podcast, I would love to get some of in your pivots, whichever ones you want to talk about, some of kind of the highlight, the most transformational things for you that held you through these times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will say, like, my friends say I'm like the pivot queen because, and this also speaks to like attachment style because pivoting can be such a like wonderful getting into alignment. And it can also be an escape strategy, which is why I thought for the longest time I had this dismissive avoidant attachment style. And so I will say some of the pivots I made were definitely me running, right?
Okay.
So the
This is
first thing,
important. Like, I do want to highlight this because I'm all about alignment in these things. So people can
yeah,
pivot for the wrong, quote unquote, reasons as well.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I will say like the majority of the pivots I made in the beginning of my business were me running, like trying to get away from perceived struggle or hurt, being trapped by my business. I still battle with like, am I trapping myself in the things? But that's been the main theme. So I started this ghostwriting. I just started ghostwriting. It wasn't even like I was like, I don't know. I wrote this book with my mom. I was really upset with like my experiences in corporate America and my mom. I went on a 10-month sabbatical basically while I was pregnant. And I'm trying to figure out who am I not in corporate America? Who am I when I'm not the top achiever at my job, which suddenly I'm not because I'm pregnant and it wasn't expected. And I'm like, my body's being hijacked and all the things. And so my mom is like, I'm trying to write this book about my experience in corporate America. Would you want to help? So I'm like, yeah. So we write this book and I fell in love with the process of writing. And I had always been like an immature writer, like amateur. Um, and so I thought, maybe I could do this as a service and I can, I'm on a sabbatical. Let me just see. And so I put out like a post on Upwork of all the places, which is known for being notoriously cheap, but I will say you just got to look. And 4 days in, I've got a $10,000 book deal
my
to
God.
ghostwrite person's memoir.
Wow.
And I fell in love with the process of interviewing somebody because I used a lot of like, I was already certified as a coach, but not using it. So I got to pull in like these mental wellness coaching and psychology background that I had. And this person loved how much I did it that he started to refer other people to me. And so suddenly I've got this book. And then the next book, I got a book for like 15,000 and then another book for 25,000. And I'm ghostwriting these books and coaching people on my writing style. In the midst of this, the book that I wrote with my mom gets picked up by Forbes because we're self-published because no publishers want it. And it starts getting traction in like the DEI space and LinkedIn and all these people because it's at the height of DEI that our book comes out. Not intentionally. We were just, lucky. And so an editor in Forbes picks up the book and reads it and interviews me and my mom and my sister. And suddenly I'm getting more requests because my mom says, my daughter's the one that really taught me this writing style. And so I've got these 3 books that I'm, knee deep in finishing up. And now I've got people messaging me to edit their books. Do you know how to edit? And how did you self-publish? Can you help me self-publish? And how do you do book covers and all the things? So this is where like I should have known fearful because I took that as I need to be everything to everybody. So yes, I will ghostwrite. Yes, I will learn how to edit. Yes, I will format. I will self-publish. And so now my business out like quicker than I could even fathom is a publishing concierge.
Yeah, this is
And
a crazy story. This is a crazy. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't even I'm just taking, yeah. I can take an editing course. I can learn. I start bringing on contractors. I start hiring help to help me manage this monstrosity of a business that I have. And then I realized I was hiring out of this lack. I just need somebody to fill the seat. I wasn't being clear about,
right.
You have to have so much experience. And I had coworkers that were seeing me and hey, hire me. I could use okay. So now I have a team and I had a team of about 6 and none of the team is doing the work. So now I have a backlog of clients. I have a 6-month wait list for books. I have a 2-month wait list for editing jobs. And we have this launch program that we're doing to help authors launch their books, similar to how my mom and I launched our book.
You're stressing me out, by the way, with this business. You are stressing me out with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I was so stressed out. And so now I've got this team that they have their own dismissive, avoidant attachment styles that I didn't realize at the time. So they say they want this. I train them. And then I give them their first job and they freak out and they run away. They just ghost. So there's stuff that has to be done. So now I'm working 40 hours, 50 hours a week to like get all the pieces. And I just hit a wall and was like, I cannot. I hit the wall when I started looking at my taxes. Like, this is fast forward about 11 months. And I'm looking and I'm like, I made $114,000. Where is it? Because I don't have it.
Wow.
Where did the money go? And how did I not even realize that I was making this much money so quick? Well, I'm paying people. I'm hiring all the strategists in the world to help me, and none of them are helping me manage this dynamics. So you can see where the passion of like attachment styles was born out of. Was I had it wasn't the business. I could do the work. I loved the work. It was managing the people. It was managing myself when clients asked for things that were out of scope, and me saying, well, that must mean that I must, because you value me. So if you value me, then I want to do more of that. And so I shut the whole business down. I wound up firing all of my team. I had a really phenomenal OBM. She was chasing me down to try and like get some marketing. And I was running the heck away from her because I was like, I do not have space to market. Like, I can barely keep I don't want more business. I can barely keep this thing. So I shut the whole thing down. I hit a wall, like a really hard wall. I fired everybody. I gave out refunds for the people that had waitlisted. And I really just like managed my business to the end of it. And then I took some time to be like, what happened? Why did this go south? Where did we go wrong? And so that's where the first pivot was born out of, was because I felt my ego was like, how could you have done this? You were so great as a leader in corporate America. How could you not lead this business? And so that critical, dismissive, avoidant comes in. That's like, the heck is wrong with you? Like, this must not be. And so my thought process was, this isn't a me thing. This was just, I didn't know how to run a business. So in order to fix that gap, I will pull in my project management background from corporate America, which I didn't want to do, but I will do it for this. And I'm going to work behind the scenes for 7-figure entrepreneurs because I need to see how they hold a 7-figure business. And I can help them by organizing the behind the scenes. And so that's where that first pivot was born out of, was this isn't a me thing. This is, I just need to learn the strategy that a 7-figure business owner uses, and I'll get the inside knowledge. And so I did that. I immediately booked a 7-figure coach as my first OBM client. And I was like, wait, this is the same thing that's happening, just at a bigger level. They're still just as stressed as I am. This is a stressful business. Launching is stressful. Managing teams is stressful. They don't have any of their stuff together. Like,
let me tell you, was it not, when you saw that, were you not like, oh, because because I also OBM here, and you think, because, people show up and it's like, oh yeah, it's so easy and whatever. And when you see behind the scenes, there's so much of it that's such a dumpster fire. And you're like, how did you get to this level of your business running like this?
It's like, I would say almost every client I worked with, it was a dumpster fire.
Crazy.
But the difference is that they had the capacity to hold the dumpster fire. I did not have capacity to hold a dumpster fire. And that's because of my, a securely attached person. You can hold a dumpster fire for as long as you need to. You know what I mean? You'll figure it out. If you have a big enough capacity to hold it, you will hold it.
I will say some of that is a little triggering to me because I do not appreciate the dumpster fire. And I have seen people who are not a dumpster fire. So just to be fair, so many people are though. And right. So you're right. So because they can get to that point because they can hold it. It's not a great way to run a business still. So
it's not
at all.
It's not. And so that's the women that I work with now, where it's like, you held this up until now, and now your capacity is run out. So how do we manage the business when your capacity is completely diminished.
So you're like the complement almost to the OBM strategy, like the management, the strategy, and then you have this side of like, oh, now let's work on you and you
let's
being
work
able
on
to do
you.
this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the progression of the pivots that I made. So that first pivot was me like, this isn't me, until I got behind the scenes and was like, wait, I'm seeing this repeatedly over and over. And this is a me thing. This is a them thing. This is like, if I can't hold my business, if I can't hold having somebody in my space to give work to because I feel uncomfortable delegating because of X, Y, Z, if I can't hold the scope of what I'm telling people I do, these are all my internal stuff. So the pivot to go from director of operations back into like a coaching role, that was alignment for me. And that felt like I am doing this not because I'm running away from director of operations. I don't like, I'm good at it.
Yeah.
But I also recognize it's not something that I enjoy. And I got into it only for the purpose of seeing how other people ran their businesses. And then at a certain point, I'm like, why am I still here? I got the data. I've got the knowledge. I know how, like, I've been doing all this inner work. I can hold a business of 7 figures now. Why am I still not doing that?
Yeah. So at the same time that you were in the DOO role, this is when you were doing this work on yourself, this inner work. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think this is important too, right? Because why are you pivoting, right? To step back. And like, if we look at this, how this story can be used as a lesson for others, it's why are we doing this? And why are we doing it? And alongside this, you need, I don't care who you are, like when you are running a business, it is the biggest opportunity for self-growth that you didn't know that you were going to hop on this train. You know, as you start your business, you might not have realized this, but you have to do this work in order to grow, and you have to want to, you know, like it has to come from this place of, I want this. And I know that in order to have this thing, like, oh, I'm really interested in growing. It's, you grow as a human, and it's really lovely, you know? And so it's hard, and there's a lot of things that happen. And but look what would have happened if you had stayed in corporate America. You know, like imagine what would have happened. None of this growth that you had would have happened at all.
The dynamics between me and my kids would have been the same.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have the time and the space to invest in myself and look at myself.
Yeah.
And then translate that into like present parenting. Like so many things. I love business is, we don't know it when we get into it, but it is such the portal for self-growth.
100%.
Like there's no other career that exists that will put you through the ringer, like running a business and facing all of your patterns.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that I love that. You know, like I'm attracted to that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Amazing. So I love all of this. And I think we've already shared so many important things. And let's end, unless, is there something else before I ask you the last thing that you're like, oh, wait, I really want to talk about this. And, you know, I've been waiting to share this. Or I can ask you my last
thing. I will say that when it comes to like choosing your pivot, the why is like you said, it's the most important thing. Why am I doing this? And not shaming yourself for if you're choosing to pivot to run, but also being aware of when am I going to stop running? Because that is one thing that I ran into, was getting behind the scenes and the comfortability of being in demand, because there is always a need for the service that I was offering as a done for you service provider, that you get comfortable. And even if you're not aligned, comfortable is comfortable. Even if you hate the work, comfortable is comfortable. So I will say, if you're comfortable but not happy, set a deadline. When am I going to do something about this?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you said, okay, it's okay if you want to pivot because you're running, it's okay. Do it. But then come back to this and say, okay. And I'm curious, what was the reasoning behind this? Why is this your advice, is to go ahead and do it?
Because, so I also love human design. And one of the things I learned about myself in human design is that I have a 3-5 profile. And the line 3 is all about trial and error. It's you have to experience the thing in order to know if this is right. And so, especially as this like fearful avoidant attachment style, if I tie that back and you get caught up in your head of what's the step to take, none of the steps feel safe, none of this feels good, so I'm just going to stay here. It can be very helpful to get in the rhythm of just taking a step and seeing where that step goes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can take the step. I'm not going to freeze. I'll be okay if I move.
I'm not going to freeze.
Yeah.
If I'm constantly moving, even if it's not towards the right thing, if I'm at least finding out what's the wrong thing, that's just as helpful as choosing the right thing. And so I've done a lot of that, of taking a step, getting to the end and being like, oh, this isn't it. Okay, let me back up. What did I learn? How am I going to pivot this time? What am I going to take? What am I going to leave behind? How am I going to change things? And let's try this one out. And eventually you'll find like where it feels good from the beginning to the end. And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I had to say that I have to go back and go deeper into my human design because I don't remember. I did this at some point. I forget my lines, but I'm like, I'm on the same page as you in that I need to experience that thing to see if it's right for me. I don't know unless I do it.
I try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm always doing so. Yeah. So the exact process you said was, at the time I had kind of I did not have your story at all. Your story is crazy, but in an amazing way. But in terms of like let me do this because this is happening, and this, it's all very frantic at the beginning until you reach a point where you're like, okay, no, like we're not doing this anymore.
I want to be intentional.
Yes,
I've done enough of trying things on and running away. Okay, I've gathered enough experience, experiential data that I can be intentional.
Exactly. So. Yes. Okay. I want to leave it on this because I feel like this is it. This is the culmination of all of the things. So if you don't mind, please share, how can we stay in touch with you if you have any free gifts? Like, how do we get more of Deb in our lives?
Yeah. So right now I am primarily on Facebook. I'll have to send you the link. I cannot remember my Facebook handle.
It'll be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yes. I'm also on Instagram. It's the business of becoming. It's business_of_becoming. And my website is businessofbecoming.com. And right now I'm knee deep in like getting all the pieces together. So I don't have a freebie right now, but I should.
Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned. Connect on social media. Go on the website. Yeah, it'll be there. Thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing. Like I said, I could chat about this for 6 hours, but we will wrap it up for now.
Thank you.
Awesome.